Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a remarkable collection of insights drawn from a deep study focused entirely on Antaranga Sadhana, the essential internal practices for cultivating, well, a deep inner life. This isn't just, a philosophical debate. It's a meticulously crafted roadmap for anyone who feels overwhelmed by the external world and is maybe ready to turn inward.
Exactly. And our mission for you today is, it's a bit complex, actually. We're diving into the case for developing this inner life, why it's arguably the most urgent task we face, and what its actual liberated purpose is.
Right.
But we also have to confront that immediate paradox. If the self is inside us, if it's our true nature, why is the process of getting there, of cultivating this inner space so incredibly difficult?
That paradox is the journey itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's fascinating. To even start the process of looking inward, you often have to engage in an external action. You drive somewhere, you sit down with a book, you listen to an outside teacher, like us right now. It feels completely counterintuitive, as if you need an external tool to access the very thing that is most intimately you. We're going to trace the steps, hopefully, from that external instruction to the internal realization.
Okay, so let's start with something we all recognize. The rich outer life. The source material uses this wonderful description, saying our lives are choreographed, planned, and orchestrated.
Choreographed.
By one single overwhelming force. The ceaseless pull of our desires.
And that word choreographed, that really hits home, doesn't it? It implies we're not really the masters of our schedule. We're just dancers following a script written by our wants.
Precisely.
We have appointments from sunrise to sunset, and then it bleeds into the weekends. It leads to this relentless, almost frantic haste.
And that haste, well, it comes at a tremendous cost. The sources really emphasize that this constant doing results in a massive loss of primal psychic and emotional energy.
Primal energy loss.
We are busy, yes, intensely busy, but the result is often that we are simply treading water. We're putting in all this effort, but there's no gain, only waste.
Right, like spinning your wheels.
Exactly. If you actually audit your life's energy expenditure, how much of it is just spent keeping up, just maintaining?
Yeah. It makes perfect sense when you consider where we allocate our time. We religiously make appointments with a personal trainer, the dentist, the doctor, the lawyer, friends for lunch.
All important, of course.
Sure, but the most critical appointment, the one that really governs everything else, is the one we constantly seem to skip. An appointment with the self.
And that skipped appointment, that brings us right to the core of this modern malaise, the nature of desire itself. The teachings identify two fundamental kinds of desires that drive our existence.
Okay, two types. What's the first?
The first type is the mukhya desire, the primary desire. This is the desire for moksha, for absolute freedom.
And why primary? Why is that the main one?
Because, according to the teaching, the acquisition of this human body, this specific form that's capable of deep introspection, rational thought, self-inquiry, that was driven by this ultimate essential longing for freedom. It's the reason we're here in this form.
Wow. So it's inherent in consciousness itself.
It seems so. And it's important to clarify what that freedom is. It's not freedom to go somewhere or freedom to buy something.
Right, not more external stuff.
No. It is freedom from having to constantly battle desires, freedom from the crushing pressure to fulfill them all the time, and freedom from the afflictions of samsara.
Okay, samsara. Let's pause there. In popular culture, it's often just the cycle of birth and death. But the sources here give a much more immediate psychological definition, don't they?
They do. A very practical one. Samsara is defined simply as some sorrow or the other.
Some sorrow or the other. I like that. It's relatable.
It is. Sorrow, in this context, means that constant dissatisfaction, the nagging sense of lack, the cyclical return to suffering, regardless of what's happening outside.
Even when things are supposedly good.
Especially then, sometimes. That cyclical nature is what makes moksha so urgent. You can't really postpone it. The teaching is very, very clear. Saying, oh, better luck next life is a deeply complacent and, frankly, dangerous attitude.
Dangerous. Why dangerous? Because we might not get another shot at being human.
Exactly. The human form is precious because of the capacity for discernment, for viveka, that it grants. If one spends this life being constantly angry or territorial or just driven purely by instinct,
then the next existence might recite that.
Yeah, that's the idea. The illustration given is quite stark. If you are excessively territorial, you might hypothetically end up as, say, a dog in the next birth. this life, this very moment, is the opportunity, the purushartha that must be seized now.
Okay, so if moksha, this ultimate freedom, is the one unifying primary purpose that drove us getting this capable body, what happens when we just forget that goal? Which, let's be honest, most of us seem to do.
Well, that primary desire, which should be driving all our actions toward liberation, it loses its focus. It kind of
Yeah.
dissipates. And it morphs into the second type of desire,
Which is?
the small desires scattered.
Ah, okay.
If
Small desires scattered. That sounds familiar.
Doesn't it? And this is the very definition of that frantic life we talked about.
Yeah.
Instead of moving purposely toward one grand, liberating goal, we spend all our energy dealing with countless tiny, immediate, and ultimately, well, unfulfilling wants.
Constantly putting out what the source calls small fires.
That's the perfect image. The outcome is that the whole span of life, literally from womb to tomb, becomes a dance governed by external pressure, by these scattered desires.
Yeah.
The teaching humorously notes that whether you're doing a Western dance like ballet or an Eastern style like kuchipudi, the specific moves change, but the pressure remains the same. The pressure to perform, to move, to fulfill something.
Always dancing to someone else's tune, or rather, the tune of our own fleeting desires.
And this relentless external dance leaves so little space, physically, emotionally, mentally, for self-actualization, for tending to the inner world. We're so busy keeping up with the outer life that the inner life becomes completely starved.
So, if the external pressure, the frantic pace, is the symptom, we need to dig down to the root cause of why it's so hard to cultivate that inner life. The teachings point squarely at a profound ignorance, unfamiliarity with I, unfamiliarity with the truth of the self, the Atma or Brahman.
This is really the first major hurdle. We need to understand that the Atma, or consciousness, is radically different from anything we normally perceive or interact with.
How so?
Well, it's neither the subject that perceives nor the object that is perceived. It actually transcends both those notions.
It transcends subject and object, but it's still here. It's not some abstract concept floating out there.
Not at all. It's not distant. It is evident, self-evident consciousness. I mean, it's the very light by which you know anything at all right now.
Okay, that sounds incredibly abstract still. How do we even begin to grasp a concept that isn't a subject or an object? We're creatures that categorize and label everything. We need boxes.
We do. And that's where this relatable demonstration, the object test, is so useful. Think about it. If I mention any object, say a pot, a tree, a shoe, or even an emotion like anger, an image, some kind of representation instantly forms in your mind.
Yep, got it. Pot, tree, shoe.
Yeah.
Image pops up.
Right. That image is the object, and you are the subject perceiving it. But now if I say the word consciousness or Brahman, try to visualize it, what happens?
Nothing concrete. Maybe a feeling, a sense of space, but definitely not a thing, not an object, just blankness almost.
Precisely. The image fails because, as the source states, it is me and I am not an object. You cannot objectify the ultimate observer. Brahman is independent of subject or object, but absolutely necessary for both to even exist.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get that. Because we fail to grasp this non-objective reality of ourselves, we fall into this trap, this error.
Yes, the grand cosmic error called adhyasa.
Apyasa, that's the key term here. It's the mix-up, the superimposition between the I consciousness and the not I, anatma.
Which is the entire complex of the body, mind, and senses. Everything we typically think we are.
Right.
Now, this confusion is often attributed to Maya, the imaginary power. The sources use the term Maya almost as an interim explanation. It's like we use it to explain why this illusion is happening before we realize there's actually no fundamental illusion to begin with, just misunderstanding.
Okay, an interim placeholder.
Kind of. But the key is understanding the two main ways this mix-up, this adhyasa, manifests and causes suffering. It's a twofold mistake.
All right, let's break that down. What is mistake number one? The one that creates all the sorrow.
That happens when we project the qualities of an Atma, things like being mortal, changing, limited, sorrowful, onto the Atma, onto the true I, which is actually immortal, changeless, and inherently whole or blissful.
Ah, so saying things like, I am afraid, or I am depressed, or the big one, I am mortal, that falls under this category.
Exactly. We are taking the temporary, changing characteristics of the mind or body and mistakenly applying them to the eternal, unchanging observer, the consciousness.
And that creates instant sorrow.
Of course. Because naturally, no one wants to die or be limited or be constantly sad. The deep irony is that the true I you are is already free of all these things. But because of adhyasa, you feel the full weight of the body's limitations and eventual decay. The knowledge confirms only the body, mind, and senses die or change. The self, the Atma, remains utterly untouched.
Okay, that's mistake one. What's mistake number two? You said it's why we're constantly chasing things.
That's the futile pursuit. Mistake two involves projecting the qualities of the Atma, its immortality, its infinity, its completeness onto the Anatma, onto things that are inherently mortal and finite. Like trying to find unending, permanent pleasure in a temporary relationship, or trying to accumulate infinite wealth, which is impossible, or, most obviously, desperately trying to defy aging and make the physical body live forever.
So we're chasing the infinite in finite things.
Yes, we're trying to make the finite deliver the promise of the infinite, and it simply can never work. That's the nonstop chase that defines so much of human activity.
What's truly mind-bending about all of this, though, is the ultimate paradox the sources highlight. We are always experiencing Brahman. There's nothing else to experience.
It's called the biggest joke in some texts. The seeker is the sought.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Literally everything. The body, the mind, our desires, the trees outside, the fundamental elements, even other planes of existence, the lokas, all of it is Brahman. You literally cannot get away from it.
It's like a wave trying to escape the ocean.
Perfect analogy. The sources even suggest a contemplation. Try to see how far you can travel away from Brahman. Just try it mentally.
You can. You realize immediately it's impossible. Your thoughts are Brahman. The space is Brahman.
Exactly. Yet, despite this intellectual understanding that the jiva, the individual self, is non-separate from Brahman, we maintain this massive gap between understanding and actually living that truth.
Yeah. We accept it intellectually in the quiet of a retreat or while reading a book. Okay, I am Brahman. Everything else is mithya, dependent reality.
But then, real life happens. You step out for the coffee break or you get that annoying email, and there's this immediate forgetting.
Total system reset back to default mode.
That forgetting is the critical psychological moment we need to understand. We move instantly from maybe a moment of total contentment to total discontentment, from profound acceptance back to anxiety, from feeling compassion to feeling aggressive competition. Why?
Because the knowledge hasn't sunk in. It's just on the surface.
Precisely. It's intellectually registered, perhaps, but it has not been internalized, not assimilated. That gap, the inability to live the truth, is exactly why internal practice, Antaranga Sadhana, isn't just a nice idea. It's absolutely mandated if we want to close that gap.
Yeah.
So, okay, how do we bridge that gap? Vedanta offers a very structured path for internalization. Shravanam, Manam, and Nididhyasanam.
Listening, reflection, and abundance.
Right. And this whole process is beautifully demonstrated by that famous dialogue between the sage Yashavalkya and his wife Maitreyi. It really provides the blueprint.
Ah, yes, Maitreyi's question. It's so simple and cuts right to the chase. Will all the wealth in the world give me moksha? Will it give me ultimate freedom?
And Yashavalkya's honesty is just refreshing, isn't it? He doesn't sugarcoat it. He says, no, absolutely not. Wealth can certainly provide a comfortable existence. The best amenities, maybe the ancient equivalent of a first-class ticket on a nice bullock cart.
Yeah, right.
But it has zero connection to liberation, to moksha. It only solves outer material problems.
And when Maitreyi hears this, she doesn't just shrug. She demonstrates her intense qualification, her readiness, by demanding the whole knowledge, as his Ardhangini, his other half.
Yes, she rejects the means that don't lead to the ultimate goal. She wants the real deal.
Her demand really sets the stage for step one, Shravanam, committed, repeated listening to the knowledge from a qualified teacher. The sources tell us that back in ancient times, for the highest qualified students, the Uttama Adhikaris, listening alone was actually sufficient.
Incredible, isn't it? Just listening could remove the ignorance instantly for them.
That's not us.
Well, generally speaking, today we're often categorized as Madhyama Adhikari's middle qualified students. We live in complex, distracting times, and our minds are generally not as tranquil or prepared as those ancient exemplars.
So Shravanam, listening, is still necessary, absolutely foundational, but it's often not enough on its own for us.
Right, because we often lack the critical prerequisite qualifications for that immediate realization upon hearing.
Okay, let's talk about those prerequisites. The list the source rattles off can feel a bit overwhelming. Shama, Dhamma, Uparati, Tatiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhanam. Can we maybe group these into more modern, digestible concepts? Because honestly, reading that list makes the whole endeavor sound almost impossible.
Absolutely. Let's simplify. Think of them as essential tools for emotional and intellectual regulation skills we need to cultivate. Shama, a tranquil mind, and Dhamma, control over the external sense organs, are essentially about self-control and achieving inner quiet. Can you stay focused? Can you manage impulses?
Okay, self-control and quiet. Got it. What about uparati?
Uparati is the ability to let go. It's described as mental abstinence, the capacity to withdraw your attention from distractions and move on.
So like emotional agility and focus, being able to disengage.
Precisely. Then you have tatisha, which is endurance, or the ability to put up with discomfort. Think of it as mental resilience, not being thrown off by every little inconvenience or contrary opinion.
Resilience. Okay.
And then Shraddha.
Shraddha is crucial. It's reverence and trust in the teacher, trust in the teaching itself, a willingness to engage with the process seriously.
And finally, samathanam.
Single-minded focus, the ability to hold the mind on the goal, on the teaching, without wavering too much. So if we lack these qualities, or they're weak.
Then our listening, our shravanam, will be shallow. The knowledge just won't integrate properly.
Exactly. Which is why, because we are Madhyamatikaris, often with a lot of questions, a lot of notions, a lot of doubts and samsais, we need step 2, madam, reflection.
Right. Manam. What's its specific job?
Manam is exclusively about making the knowledge we've heard, Shravanam, error-free. It's not about gaining new information. It's about resolving our intellectual doubts and apparent contradictions.
Like what sort of doubts?
Well, a common one is, okay, I hear that I am Brahman, but look at me. I struggle to tie my own shoes sometimes. I make mistakes. How can I, this finite, error-prone entity, possibly be the same as Ishwara, who is supposed to be omniscient and omnipotent? That's a classic intellectual hurdle.
I can see that. So manam is the process of wrestling with those questions.
Yes, using logic, reason, and the scriptural pointers themselves to resolve that conceptual contradiction until the intellect is fully convinced. It's about achieving intellectual clarity and conviction regarding the nature of the knowable object, Brahman, and the means of knowing it.
Okay, so Shravan gets the info in, manam clears up the intellectual confusion, but the biggest hurdle, the one we identified earlier as the gap between knowing and living, that's addressed by step 3. Niditi-sanam, abundance or contemplation. This is the solution for viparita pavana.
Ah yes, viparita pavana, this psychological hangover. It literally means oppositional tendency or contrary feeling.
That sounds like the core issue for many of us.
It often is. It's the classic case of the student who intellectually knows, I am Brahman, everything else is relative reality, Mithya, but then admits, I know this, but I'm still behaving like an idiot. They know the truth, yet their habitual emotional patterns, their psychological conditioning, keeps pulling them back into identifying with the limited, sorrowful anatma.
This sounds like the hardest part, doesn't it? Because intellectual doubt feels solvable, but deeply ingrained emotional habits. That's tough.
It is generally considered the most challenging phase, which is why Nididhyasanam is described as the essential psychological preparation necessary for the knowledge to truly sit, to become lived reality. If the knowledge is meant to reside peacefully in the mind, well, we first have to clean the mind.
Clean the house before the guest arrives.
Something like that. The source describes the inner room, the mind, as often being like a trash can, cluttered and filled with thickets of raga, compulsive attachments, and dvesha, compulsive aversions. Nididhyasanam is the work of clearing those thickets.
Now, the beauty here, as the sources point out, is that this practice isn't just about some abstract future spiritual progress, what they call adrishtaphala or earning punya. It's designed to provide immediate, visible results, drishtaphala.
Yes, and that's so important for motivation. The fastest way to gain tangible calmness, clarity, and a sense of centeredness is through proper contemplation, proper nididhyasanam. The calmness you gain right here, right now, through preparing the mind and sitting with the knowledge, that proves the efficacy of the practice. It shows you it's working, making the long-term pursuit feel worthwhile and sustainable.
Okay, so we start the nididhyasanam process by clearing out the mind's clutter. The source material gives a very specific starting point. Begin by externalizing the stubborn, internalized emotional baggage. And the focus immediately lands on our primary caregivers, our parents.
Yes. Our relationship with our parents, or whoever functioned as primary caregivers, is often the root system for almost all our internalized notions, our hurts, our unmet expectations, and even inherited fears or legacies.
How does that work? We project onto them.
We project all these things onto them, consciously or unconsciously, and this creates an internal mother and an internal father that could be vastly different from the external people they actually were or are.
Like an image we carry inside us.
Exactly. An image built from our needs, disappointments, and interpretations. And these projections leave samskaras, which you can nicely translate as some scar or the other, these deep psychological impressions or grooves in the mind.
This is a powerful concept, but it sounds potentially difficult too. I mean, people spend years, lifetimes maybe, trying to fix or change their parents or just being angry at them. What's the specific technique the sources offer to externalize this baggage, to get some distance?
It's a visualization practice, really, designed to foster objectivity and compassion. You consciously visualize your parents not as the powerful adults you knew, but as defenseless, innocent 5-year-old children.
As 5-year-olds, why 5?
It's an age of relative innocence and vulnerability. The moment you look at them through this soft gaze of compassion, seeing them as small children, the capacity for blame and accusation tends to just drop away. You start to realize they were also just vulnerable, small humans operating under their own limitations, their own hurts, their own conditioning.
And the practical result of seeing them that way is?
You grant them freedom. You mentally free them to be who they were and who they are, both in reality and, more importantly, in your memory. By doing this, you release the heavy emotional burden you've been carrying around about them. It loosens the grip.
That's a crucial distinction. It's about freeing yourself by changing your perspective.
Absolutely. And crucially, this practice demands that we maintain the distinction between an explanation and an excuse. We are seeking an objective explanation for their behavior. Perhaps they were hurt, limited, fearful, or just doing the best they could with what they knew. That understanding helps externalize our anxiety and judgment.
Right.
We are not looking for a subjective excuse that somehow justifies our continued anger, resentment, or avoidance. It's about objective understanding leading to release, not subjective justification for staying stuck. Once we achieve this kind of objective compassion, the emotional baggage tied to them starts to loosen its grip significantly.
Okay. Now, to aid this clearing process and the ongoing maintenance of the mind, we turn to the mantra. The mantra is described vividly as the necessary mental soap to cleanse the antakarana, the inner instrument of the mind, intellect, ego, and memory.
Mental soap. I like that. It's an internal purification tool. The mantra is primarily a form of masa karma mental action, mental prayer performed silently and internally. Its main focus, especially initially, is on yielding visible results, trishta phala.
Visible results
Like a calmer mind, improved focus, a sense of inner stability, things you can actually notice right away. This is really important because that's what we need immediately to feel like the practice is worthwhile.
This contrasts with other practices like kayika, physical rituals like a yagya, or vachika, verbal chanting, kirtan, which are said to yield more punya, more invisible spiritual merit for the future.
Generally, yes. While mantra certainly generates punya, its most immediate and noticeable effect is on the state of the mind now. Those visible results are what keep us going in the beginning, aren't they? We need some proof that the effort is actually working.
Definitely. So how does it work? How does repeating a sound calm the mind?
Well, on one level, the mantra brings resonance and singular focus. When you repeat, say, Om Namah Shivaya, you are repeatedly asking the mind, which loves to wander, to come back and hold that one sacred thought, that one vibration. It trains focus.
Like a mental anchor.
Exactly. But perhaps its most profound function, psychologically, is creating what the Source calls an interim identity.
An interim identity? How does repeating a sound or phrase create an identity? That sounds interesting.
It temporarily allows you to remint yourself, to step into the role of a bhakta, a devotee, someone connected directly to Ishwara, to the divine. For that period of mantra repetition, you consciously let go of the burdens and pains associated with your other, often problematic roles. The struggling son, the stressed employee, the hurt partner, whatever it may be.
So it's like putting on a different hat for a while, a sacred hat.
A sacred, safe hat. This interim identity as a bhakta acts as a bridge, connecting your current limited, suffering self to the universal, until you eventually stabilize in the understanding of your true, already liberated nature.
It sounds like a powerful mechanism of surrender, then.
Absolutely. The mantra repetition turns your inner mental space into an altar of surrender. All those difficult, unrequited feelings, all the emotional burdens and disappointments over which you feel you have absolutely no personal power. You consciously place them here, at this inner altar.
Handing them over.
Yes. The sources say that this altar of surrender has the power to alter you, to transform those deeply calcified hurts and difficult feelings through the grace of the Universal Mother and Father, through Ishwara. It's a profound act of handing over the baggage you simply couldn't drop or resolve by yourself. Okay, so even with this clearing process, using visualization and mantra, there's often still this deeper, more stubborn, heavy baggage that remains. This resides in what we commonly call the unconscious mind, referred to in these teachings as kashaya. Literally, it means residue, astringency, or sludge.
Sludge, that's a evocative term. So this isn't a new idea, right? Well, Freud gets a lot of credit for popularizing the unconscious in the West.
Oh, absolutely not new. This concept of a kind of sludgy emotional repository, this kashaya, is discussed extensively in ancient Vedantic texts, notably in the Mandukya Karika by Gaudapadacharya, Shankar's grand teacher.
And this sludge, it sounds like the part of the mind where we stuffed things we were too small or too fragile to deal with when the original hurt or trauma happened.
That's precisely right. The sources describe the unconscious, this kashaya, almost poetically as a gift from Bhagavan, a necessary part of the divine psychological order. It actually provided essential protection.
Protection, how so?
Because the child, faced with intense conflict or neglect or abuse, often lacks the emotional or cognitive capacity to process those overwhelming feelings. The unconscious acts as a survival mechanism, stuffing down these complex, unbearable feelings so the child can simply survive the immediate environment and continue developing.
So kashaya is that viscous and sludgy body of emotions where the really deeply unpleasant stuff like primal anger, terror, jealousy, greed gets stored. But the source also mentions pleasant but distracting nostalgia being stored there too.
Yes, it's not just negative. Deeply ingrained attachments, even pleasant ones that keep us stuck in the past, can also be part of this kashaya. And when we start doing serious inner work, like meditation or contemplation, this sludge inevitably starts to bubble up to the surface.
Okay, so it bubbles up. What do we do then? How do we handle it? It sounds potentially overwhelming.
It can be, which is why the strategy needs to be very delicate, very precise. The approach recommended is called the soft sakshi mode, or SSM.
Soft sakshi mode. Sakshi means witness, right?
Yes, witness consciousness.
Right.
But the soft part is key. And the most crucial warning here is, do not dredge the swamp. You are not meant to take a mental stick and go poking around in the depths looking for more issues, more trauma, just because you think you should. That can be re-traumatizing.
So no digging for trouble.
No.
Yeah.
You only deal with what naturally bubbles up to the surface in your daily life, triggers, reactions, or during your formal meditation practice. Only what presents itself.
Okay. How does the soft sakshi mode practically work then? It implies watching, witnessing, but compassionately.
Exactly. You adopt the soft adult sakshi mode. Think of it as functioning like the objective, loving, non-reactive parent that maybe you didn't have externally, but that you can cultivate internally.
The internal good parent?
Yes. And from that stable, witnessing place, you look at the inner child, which is really that concretized, unhealed emotion or memory that's bubbling up. You look at it compassionately and dispassionately without the slightest hint of identification. You acknowledge it. Ah, there is fear arising, or there is anger present. You clearly see that is an experience happening in awareness, but it is not who I am.
So this is essentially active reparenting of the self. If, for example, a deep-seated fear suddenly erupts in my adult life, triggered by something small, I treat that intense fear as the inner child throwing a tantrum.
That's a perfect way to look at it. The adult sakshi, the internal parent, must look on that tantrum, whether it's fear, anger, sadness, with patience, with understanding, and with unconditional love. You simply wait for the tantrum to finish, the energy to exhaust itself, just as a stable external parent would ideally wait for a 5-year-old to cry themselves out without getting drawn into the drama or punishing them for it.
And the goal isn't to get rid of the inner child, right?
Absolutely not. That's a common mistake, trying to suppress or destroy these parts of ourselves. The objective is integration. The inner child, representing these unhealed parts, must be witnessed, understood, loved, and ultimately integrated into the mature adult self. They need to be brought home, not kicked out.
Because if that unhealed part isn't interrogated, understood, and integrated,
then the profound knowledge of Vedanta, the truth of I am Brahman, will just remain intellectual. It'll go in one ear and boomerang right back out, as the source visibly puts it. It won't stick because the psychological ground isn't prepared to receive it.
Okay, this whole process of psychological clearing, dealing with kashaya using the soft sakshi mode, it seems to align perfectly with the Vedantic understanding of overcoming Maya on the individual level.
Yeah.
We learned earlier that Maya, this power of illusion or misperception, has two main powers. Avarana, the concealing power.
And Vidyashipa, the projecting power, yes.
Can we map those onto this psychological work?
It maps beautifully. Avarana Shakti, the concealing power, is equivalent to the unconscious mind itself. The Kashaya, the veil of ignorance that conceals the underlying truth of Brahman. It's the fundamental not knowing who we are.
And Vikshipa Shakti, the projecting power.
That is the manifest result of that concealment, is the outward projection. Our reactive outbursts, our chronic negative patterns, the sudden anger, the persistent sadness, even psychosomatic manifestations like unexplained illnesses. It's the acting out based on the underlying ignorance.
Okay, can you put this into a simple, everyday analogy for the listener? Avarana and Vikshepa?
Sure. Think of a completely dark room. You walk in, avarana is the darkness itself. It conceals the furniture, the layout of the room. You simply don't know what's there.
Got it. Darkness concealment includes Avarana.
Right. Now, vikshepa is when you inevitably bump into the unseen coffee table, stub your toe, and then react by yelling, maybe kicking the table, blaming the furniture. That reaction, that outward manifestation of distress caused by the unseen obstacle, that's the projection of the vikshepa.
Okay, that makes sense. So the action plan here seems a bit counterintuitive based on that analogy. We don't try to attack the darkness, Avarana, directly.
Exactly. We don't sit there trying to somehow mentally defeat the fundamental ignorance or the entire unconscious at once. That's too vast, too abstract. Instead, we tackle the manifestations, the vikshepa. We deal with the things we can see and interact with, the specific anger that arose today, the particular anxieties that keep showing up, the psychosomatic symptoms, the reactive patterns in our relationships.
We work with what bubbles up, what we trip over.
Precisely. Because we can see them, observe them, and apply the soft sakshi mode and other practices to them.
And the underlying Avarana, the deep concealment, the darkness itself. We trust that it's a Shwara made, part of the cosmic setup.
Yes. Since avarana is seen as a cosmic power, a function of Maya itself, we acknowledge it, but we trust that as we diligently address the projections, vikshepa, the underlying concealment will gradually lose its power. Ishwara can take care of the root as we take responsibility for the manifest symptoms. Our job, the part we are empowered and required to do, is to consistently address the projections, the reactions, and the patterns that bubble up daily. This is the most practical, effective strategy for dealing with Maya at the individual level. All right, so once the mind has been reasonably cleared and prepared through this kind of nididhyasanam, through dealing with the kashaya, the contemplation itself, the active dwelling on the Vedantic truths, becomes more effective. And it should be customized.
Customized? How so? It's not just repeating, I am Brahman.
Well, yes and no. While that's the ultimate truth, the specific contemplation needs to directly address the practitioner's most stubborn, lingering viparita bhavana, their specific oppositional tendencies. It needs to counteract their primary sticking point.
Okay, give me an example. If someone's main issue is that they cannot let go, they're constantly over-involved, micromanaging, feeling responsible for everyone and everything.
Right, that pattern of over-attachment and entanglement. For that person, the most potent customization would be to consistently recall and deeply contemplate the statement, I am a Sangha. I am inherently uninvolved, unattached consciousness.
So they focus on the unattached nature of the self to counter their habit of attachment.
Exactly. The contemplation becomes the constant deep reflection on that specific aspect of the truth. I, as awareness, am inherently free, uninvolved, untouched by the drama playing out. It directly counters the ingrained habit.
Okay, another example. What if the practitioner suffers from a chronic feeling of lack, of neediness, of never having enough, never being enough, that feeling of incompleteness?
For that person, the customized contemplation would be recalling and meditating deeply on, I am Purna. I am already whole, complete, non-lacking fullness itself.
Purna, complete.
Yes. They focus on their inherent completeness to counteract the pervasive feeling of lack.
So it sounds like a kind of targeted mental counter-programming. You identify your core issue, your main viparita bhavana, and you apply the relevant aspect of the ultimate truth directly to it. You recall these phrases. You see the meaning clearly in your own native language, feel the truth of it, and allow it to sink in to counteract the old pattern.
That's a good way to put it. And as this sinks in, you start to have these incredible insights. The sources make a truly profound statement here. Even your sadness rides on the wave of ananda, bliss.
Wow, how is that possible? Sadness feels like the opposite of bliss.
From the standpoint of the limited ego, yes. But when you begin to stabilize in the understanding that ananda, inherent bliss or peace, is the very substratum of existence, the nature of consciousness itself, then you see that sadness, like any other emotion or experience, is just an event, a temporary wave arising and falling on that fundamental ocean of ananda. The sadness is temporary, the underlying bliss nature is permanent. The sadness depends on the ananda for its very existence.
That shifts everything. The sadness doesn't define me. It's just passing through the unchanging bliss that I am.
Precisely. Now, this entire process of integration also involves a crucial progression in how we understand and relate to Ishwara, God, the divine, the cosmic order. It's not static.
We often start, especially as beginners, by connecting to Ishwara through a specific form or name, a chosen deity, right? Which is helpful because it gives us a concrete point of connection when we feel lost or unconnected.
Yes, that's stage one, connecting via a form, Ishtadevata. It's essential for many. But the crucial, often difficult growth happens in stage two, which the sources call Ishwarification.
Ishwarification, making everything into Ishwara.
In a sense, yes. It means consciously learning to see the whole universe, the entire Jagat, the world of effects, everything you experience as being completely not separate from Ishwara, the ultimate cause.
The analogy used is powerful. An ornament is non-separate from the gold it's made of.
Exactly. The ornament depends on the gold for its existence. It is gold in a particular form. Similarly, the entire universe, every single thing in it, is non-separate from Bhagavan, from Ishwara. Everything is the expression of the divine order and substance.
Now, intellectually, that sounds beautiful, and it's relatively easy to see Ishwara in a beautiful flower or a kind child or a spectacular sunset. We feel that connection. But the teaching emphasizes that true growth, the real test, comes from seeing Ishwara in the difficult person, in the unpleasant situation, in the suffering.
This is where most people stumble. They maintain a compartmentalized view of the divine pound. God is only in the good things, the pleasant things. But that view is fragile. It shatters the moment you face real conflict, injustice, or pain.
But how is this practically possible? This is the million-dollar question. If someone is actively causing me harm or acting unfairly, or if I'm facing a terrible situation, how do I see that as Ishwara, as the infallible karmic order, without becoming passive or complacent or just excusing truly bad behavior? It feels wrong.
That is the essential question, and the answer requires a significant shift in perspective. It lies in abstraction. You have to learn to abstract yourself from the intense personal particularities of the situation, from the story of that specific person doing something bad to me.
Okay, abstract from the personal story. To what?
To seeing the event through the lens of universal impersonal law. Ishwara is not some person intervening randomly. Ishwara is the flawless, impartial law of karma itself, the entire system of cause and effect operating perfectly.
So the difficult person or the painful situation, they are simply the mechanism, the delivery system for my own past actions, my own karma, to return to me.
Precisely. From this higher perspective, difficulties don't mean Ishwara has abandoned you. Paradoxically, they mean Ishwara is close to me, because the karmic order is operating, bringing back what needs to be balanced. If you're experiencing difficulty, it is ultimately your own karma ripening and coming back, demanding resolution, learning, and acceptance from you.
Wow. That perspective shifts the focus entirely, doesn't it? It moves from blaming the external perpetrator to looking at my own required learning, my own accountability for actions and reactions, past and present. It removes the victimhood stance.
Completely. It demands responsibility. Yeah, it doesn't mean you don't take practical steps to protect yourself or address injustice, but the inner stance shifts from blame and reactivity to acceptance of the karmic flow and a focus on your own response.
And once we begin to master that level of abstraction, seeing the impersonal order even in personal difficulty, then the final stage 3, Sarvatmabhava, becomes possible.
Yes. Sarvatmabhava is the ultimate vision of non-duality, where there is truly no division perceived between self and other, subject and object. All perceived differences, all anatma, resolve completely into the one non-dual atma. This is the steady abidance in Arupa Ishwara, the formless, attributeless reality. That's the culmination. Now, to help us consolidate this whole psychological process, confronting the unconscious, dealing with the inner sludge, seeking liberation, the sources brilliantly use the ancient allegory of the Amrita Manthana, the churning of the ocean of milk.
Right. The churning of the ocean itself is such a perfect metaphor for the rigorous, difficult process of self-inquiry, isn't it? Churning the deep, dark, vast ocean of the unconscious mind.
It really is. And look who's involved. On one side, you have the devas, the gods, representing dharma, our higher aspirations, the desire for Vedanta, for truth.
And on the other side,
The asuras, the demons, representing adharma, resistance, the pull towards sensual gratification, ignorance, and crucially, they have to team up.
why is that important, that they work together?
It represents the necessary fusion, or at least the necessary engagement, of both our positive and negative energies, our light and shadow aspects, in the work of self-discovery. You can't just use the good parts, you have to harness the energy of the bad parts too, the resistance itself, to do the churning. The process is intense. The churning rod is Mount Mandara, a huge mountain. The rope is the great serpent Vasuki. It takes immense effort.
And what comes out first is the key psychological insight, isn't it? Before any nectar, any Amrita of immortality.
The worst poison imaginable, the hala hala poison, is unleashed from the very bottom of the ocean.
Oof, that hits hard.
Doesn't it? This poison represents the toxic, deeply buried complexity of the collective and individual unconscious, all the unresolved fear, anger, trauma, darkness that must be confronted and dealt with before liberation is possible. This poison is so potent, it threatens to destroy all the worlds.
And who deals with it?
Shiva, the great yogi, the embodiment of awareness and detachment. He consumes the poison to save everyone. His consort, Parvati, presses his throat, arresting the poison there, which turns his throat blue, hence his name Yelakantha, the blue-throated one.
So this act of neutralizing the poison, it symbolizes neutralizing the destructive power of our own unconscious material, our kashaya, as it comes up.
Precisely. And notice how it's neutralized. Through Shiva, representing the detached witnessing awareness, and through recourse to Ishvara, through prayer, grace, surrender, just as we discussed with the mantra practice and the altar of surrender, you need that divine help to handle the really toxic stuff.
Okay, so the poison is handled, then the good stuff starts coming out, culminating in the Amrita, the nectar of immortality. But there's another twist, right, with the Asura Svarbhanu.
Yes. When the nectar finally arrives, the clever Asura Svarbhanu disguises himself as a diva and sneaks into the line to get a sip. Just as he drinks, the sun and moon gods spot him and alert Vishnu, who instantly decapitates him with his discus.
But it's too late.
Too late. The nectar has already passed his throat. Because he tasted immortality, both the head and the body become immortal, but separated. They become the shadow planets, Rahu, the head, and Ketu, the tail.
Wow. That is such a vivid picture of the shadow self, the unconscious component. It implies that even after all the churning, even after gaining the nectar, this shadow aspect isn't completely eliminated or destroyed. It's managed, maybe outgrown in its influence, but the essential component is here to stay.
Exactly. Rahu and Ketu represent that enduring psychological impact of our unintegrated shadow. They are part of the cosmic order now. Their influence persists.
So what do they represent psychologically? Rahu, the head, without a body.
Rahu, the head, symbolizes insatiable desire, ambition, overthinking, relentless passion, a hunger for power and control. It's the intellect divorced from the heart, divorced from the body's wisdom and capacity to actually assimilate the nectar, the truth. It leads to excesses, obsession, manipulation, a kind of dictatorship of the mind.
Okay, that sounds like a modern affliction too. What are the practical antidotes for the negative expressions of Rahu?
Viveka. Clear discernment, the ability to constantly separate the real from the unreal, the necessary from the excessive, and the conscious avoidance of extremes, of obsessive pursuits. You have to actively tame that purely intellectual, power-hungry drive.
Okay. And conversely, Ketu, the tail, the body without a head.
Ketu represents the opposite problem, a lack of direction, a lack of critical thought. It's associated with confusion, feelings of dissociation, problems that seem to have unknown origins, sudden losses, accidents, and also deep feelings of hopelessness, meaninglessness, and despair. It's the feeling of being cut off, lost, adrift.
That feeling of disconnection. What's the antidote for Ketu's difficult influence?
Primarily vairagya, dispassion or detachment towards the finite, fleeting world, letting go of clinging to things that inevitably cause suffering. And very importantly, the source highlights that the rigorous study and contemplation of Vedanta, of self-knowledge, is a powerful remedy for Ketu.
Really? Why is that?
Because Ketu represents the search for ultimate meaning and liberation, but in a confused, headless way. When you actively engage in the structured study of Vedanta, which is the path to liberation, Ketu is said to be pleased, to find its true purpose, and its disruptive influence diminishes. It brings direction to that headless search.
That's a fascinating link, that engaging deeply in self-study actually placates the shadow component related to despair and meaninglessness. It gives it a constructive job.
Exactly. And just for a final moment of trivia that ties this whole cosmic drama back to the sensory world, the mythology says that the drops of the Asura Svarbhanu's blood that fell to earth gave rise to pungent, strong-smelling tamasic plants like garlic and onions.
Ah, and that's why they're often avoided by yogis that were on a strict spiritual path.
Yes, traditionally they are avoided partly because they are seen as arising from this azuric source and are believed to potentially aggravate the restless, excessive tendencies associated with Rahu and Ketu, hindering the calmness needed for deep meditation.
Wow. It really is a complete psychological and mythological package, isn't it? The whole allegory confirms that the confrontation with the unconscious, with our own inner poison and shadow, is messy, potentially dangerous, but absolutely necessary for achieving real, lasting liberation, the Amrita.
Hashtag Hachotra.
So we have really journeyed quite far today, haven't we? From understanding the external pressures of modern life that keep us outwardly focused, to recognizing the root cause of our inner struggle in Atyasa, that fundamental I and not I mix-up.
Mm-hmm.
And then we laid out the complex yet ultimately actionable path of Nidhyasanam. This inner work demands that objective externalization of old burdens, especially regarding caregivers.
Right, the 5-year-old visualization.
Yes, and cultivating that softening of the Sakshi gaze, the compassionate witness toward our own inner child, our own difficult emotions, and finally, the necessity of surrender, handing over our unresolvable emotional baggage to the universal law, to Ishwara, often facilitated by practices like mantra. The key realization, I think, that runs through all of this deep dive is that the mind, it's fundamentally a companion. It's not an enemy to be crushed. It cannot be controlled like a simple on-off switch, but it must be managed patiently, skillfully, with love.
Beautifully put. A companion to be managed.
And we often have to start small, with simple commitments, maybe just a 1-minute meditation or a few repetitions of a mantra. We have to gently trick the mind, almost, into becoming available to us, accepting that its very nature is movement, flux, and learning to manage that flow rather than constantly trying to dam the river.
And if you, listening now, find yourself feeling discouraged by the seeming difficulty of this inner practice, just remember to return again and again to the profound shift in perspective that Vedanta offers. It turns everything upside down.
How so?
Because you are fundamentally Brahman, the nature of the self is Ananda, pure bliss, peace, wholeness. Therefore, being happy, being fulfilled, being at ease. That is your natural, effortless state. It's the default setting.
So conversely, being sad, anxious, fearful, incomplete, that's the inauthentic state.
Exactly. That suffering is a result of the adhyasa mix-up, the ignorance. It's not inherent to who you are. So if your life feels like a constant struggle, like wearing an ill-fitting costume, that feeling is actually feedback, telling you it's a fake construct built on ignorance. Pursuing the truth of the self, then, isn't about achieving something new. It's simply about shedding the inauthentic layers to embrace your easiest, most natural, most authentic reality.
That is incredibly empowering. Okay, so now that you have this blueprint, perhaps, and now that you truly grasp, maybe for the first time, that happiness isn't something to chase, but is your actual birthright. Here's the final thought to ponder. Your rich outer life is meticulously scheduled, down to the minute sometimes. What part of that schedule, what activity, what commitment is actually non-essential when viewed from this perspective? What are you prepared to consciously give up or sacrifice in order to carve out the necessary non-negotiable space for the rich inner life that is waiting right here, right now to be claimed?
It really is time to make that appointment with yourself.